UFC Vegas 73 betting and DraftKings show. We have 12 fights this Saturday afternoon. I'm Jon Kelly. Let's hear the picks. Kicking things off in the welterweight division, we have Takashi Sato going up against Themba Greenbow. This one's currently a pick'em, and I have a ton of interest for this fight on DraftKings because for starters, they're both priced pretty affordably in the mid-range. We have Sato at 8,200, Greenbow at 8K. I think there's a high likelihood that not only this fight finishes, but that the winner is going to score well. I think on one hand, we have Sato, who we know what he's bringing to the table. He's an early knockout or bust type of fighter, and outside of that early power, he really just doesn't have anything else to his game. He's historically struggled in terms of his defensive grappling, and I'm not even sure if his durability is all that good. We've seen him knocked out twice inside the first round in his career. And then on the flip side, Greenbow is still pretty untrustworthy, super unproven. You know, he debuted against my guy, AJ Fletcher, ended up losing that fight, but he did land a couple takedowns there. We've seen him have some submissions on his record. He's looking for submissions when he does get on the mat, and he is an active wrestler. So that's why I kind of lean towards the Greenbow side here, just because he has that multiple takedown upside and the potential to find a finish with the submission. So I think it's probably either Sato clips him early and gets him out of there, or Greenbow takes him down multiple times, melts him on the mat, and finds a sub. So like I said, it's a great target on DraftKings. I'm going to have exposure to both sides, but the official pick is going to be Greenbow by submission. Next up in the women's flyweight division, we have Natalia Silva, a minus 900 favorite with the comeback on Victoria Leonardo at plus 625. Silva is the biggest betting favorite on the card. She has swelled up to a minus 900 favorite currently. She's $9,700 on DraftKings. And I think that's where the bigger conversation is, because we all expect her to basically run through Victoria Leonardo, whether she just dominates her to a 30-27 or she gets her out of there inside the distance is kind of irrelevant. We're really more so worried about what she's doing in terms of her DraftKings score, because at 9,700, we know historically that's pretty difficult once you go over that 9,500 mark to be on the optimal lineup. And she's somebody who has only scored 85 points in both of her UFC fights. I don't really see a huge potential for her to finish inside the first round. And if that's not going to happen, I'm really starting to question how she's not only going to be able to pay off that price tag, but to even meet that price tag. So I think she comes in under that mark. I'll look to be underweight to the field. I'm not sure if I'll just cross her off completely, but if I don't do that, it's going to be very minimal exposure to her. Even though I think she dominates this fight, I think it's just really tough for her to pay off that price tag. And we have a lot of other fighters that I actually like this week, so I'm okay with steering away from the biggest favorite in Silva. Next fight up, we're in the lightweight division as Nick Fiore comes in as a minus 130 small favorite. The comeback on Chase Hooper is plus 110. And this is a big bet for me. I'm on Chase Hooper for 2.5 units on the money line at plus 120. And here's why. For starters, I think on one hand, we have Nick Fiore, who's entirely unproven. And I know he's taken a decent amount of money. We saw the line move early in his favor. But I think a big reason for that is just because people don't like Chase Hooper. They know he's a punching bag on the feet. We've seen him get rocked multiple times as recently as his last time out against Steve Garcia, but this is a much different matchup for him, a much better matchup for him. And don't get me started on Fiore's level of competition that he's faced on the regional scene. He had 6 quick finishes all in the first round, all against complete tomato cans. And then he faces Mateus Rebecki, who's a guy that I actually like, that fought on this past season of Contender Series and gets dominated from pillar to post. Yes, he took that fight on short notice, but basically didn't show us anything to get excited about. And now people are just putting blind faith in him because he's fighting against Chase Hooper moving up a weight class. I do not see that. What I see is Chase Hooper, yes, he has his limitations. Like I said, complete punching bag on the feet. His striking defense, non-existent. His striking offense, very poor as well. But what this kid is good at is submission attempts. He's a very good grappler. We know that. All he needs to do is get the fight to the ground, even if it means pulling guard, which we've seen him do time and time again. But the other thing that he's very good at is reversing. He reversed Daniel Tamor. He reversed Steven Peterson, and he reversed Felipe Colares 5 times in that fight. Rest in peace, Colares. So I'm not ready to say that Fiore is just going to be able to take Chase Hooper down repeatedly, hang out in top position, and just dominate the fight. I know he has some grappling credentials. I think Chase Hooper is a much better submission grappler. I think he's a much better scrambler. And I think if Fiore is the one to be able to take him down, I think it's not going to be long before Hooper sweeps him and reverses him and then puts Fiore in danger, because I think he is much more likely to finish this fight on the mat. And if you don't expect Fiore to grapple, A, I think you're wrong, but B, what tells you that he's just going to be able to stuff takedowns and sprawl and brawl in this fight? I know that Hooper's wrestling is not good. I've already mentioned that. But we know that Fiore is kind of similar to Hooper in that he's very easy to take down. He wants to grapple. He grapples in most of his fights. And we've seen, even in those low-level regional fights, we've seen him get taken down and out-grappled and hip-tossed like he was a sack of potatoes. So I don't think this dude has really a shot to be able to keep this fight on the feet and win the striking, even though I do think he's probably the better striker. I don't think that's going to be the game plan. Now Hooper's getting somebody who is a willing dance partner, a guy that wants to go to the mat with him, and that's where he wants to be. That's what he's good at, and I think he proves that on Saturday, and he gets it done. So on DraftKings at 7,900, I think he's a great play. He's going to come with ownership, but I also backed him on the money line at plus 120. I think Hooper gets it done this weekend. We're going Chase Hooper. Give me the M&Ms on Saturday. Next fight up in the heavyweight division, we have Rodrigo Nascimento, a minus 205 favorite with the comeback on Ilir Latifi at plus 175. And this is a matchup that I think could be competitive just because Nascimento is a guy who trains out of a good camp, an American Top Team. He has a good skill set for the heavyweight division. We've seen him mix in the wrestling. He's a decent submission grappler once he gets guys down as well. But we haven't always seen him go to the wrestling. We've seen him be perfectly content to duke it out on the feet, even at times when he had a clear grappling advantage. So that's one thing where I can't really put much faith into him at a minus 205 price tag. And then on the flip side, Ilir Latifi is very difficult to out-grapple. He's actually never given up a takedown in the UFC, and he's had a very long career across multiple divisions, never even gave up one takedown. So I'm not sure that Nascimento is going to be able to come in here and land multiple takedowns and out-grapple Latifi. And if that's the case, then I think we have a pretty low-volume striking match. We've seen Latifi rely on his wrestling recently. Maybe he's able to land a takedown or two, but even in that scenario, he's not a guy that's really looking to finish. He's just looking to lay there, stall time, land some control, and just not really do much in terms of being a threat to finish the fight. And if that's the case, then I think this fight's going to play out pretty competitively and soar over. So I'm interested in overs in this fight. I think it ultimately does see the judges' scorecards because I just don't see either guy really having much of a threat on the feet. And I don't think Nascimento is going to be able to have much grappling success. So I just can't really see this fight finishing at a high clip. So we're going Nascimento by decision. I still slightly lean him, but I'm not betting him, not touching it. And I think there's better fights to target up and down the card this week. Next fight up, we have Orion Kase, a slight favorite at minus 120. The comeback on Gilbert Urbina is plus 100. And we saw Kase his last time out against Blood Diamond really lean on that wrestling. He's a guy who comes from a collegiate wrestling background. He averages 2.3 takedowns per 15 minutes. So we know that's clearly what he's looking to do, but he also has a little bit of power on the feet as well. 6 of his 8 wins have come by knockout, but he's not really a very technical striker. It's more just like winging powerful shots. And he's a guy that we know that has historically struggled in terms of the cardio. Yes, he's in good shape. I believe he's a strength and conditioning coach or a personal trainer outside of the UFC as well. But we just know that all of that wrestling, all that aggressiveness, those big power shots on the feet, the big heavy movements that he does early in fights, just generally always seem to gas fighters out. And we see it time and time and again with him and other guys that fight like that. Those big explosive moves, especially when they're not landing a lot of the time, it's just going to tax that gas tank much, much quicker. So that's really the concern with him, because when he does gas, his optics start to look very poor. He's not a guy that plays much defense to begin with, and once he starts to get tired, he plays zero defense. It looks really bad. So that's one thing I don't think you could really trust him. And then on the flip side, Gilbert Urbina, I don't think you could trust him either, to be fair, because we've seen, despite never being knocked out, he's been hurt multiple times throughout his 8 professional fights, including on The Ultimate Fighter as well. And then he's coming off about a 2-year layoff. So hopefully we see some improvements from his game, but he is overall just a guy that I think could be the busier of the two in this matchup if he can keep the fight standing. even if he doesn't, I think he's a better submission grappler than Kase. I think he's the busier striker. He's got solid leg kicks. I just don't trust his durability all that much. But again, Kase, yes, he's powerful. He's just not really the most measured striker. So I don't know if he's going to be able to hurt Urbina on the feet. And if he's not, I think this could be one where Urbina's cardio's not great, but I think I do expect him to have the better gas tank here. If the fight gets into the third round, he could maybe take over late. So I slightly lean Urbina by decision, just based on being the more active of the two and hopefully making some improvements in the time off. But it's not a confident lean for me. I'll have exposure to both sides on DraftKings just because the price is favorable, but we're going with the dog here in Urbina. And next up, we have Karolina Kovalkovich, a -130 favorite with the comeback on Vanessa Demopolis at +110. And this is one that I think could be a sneaky action-packed fight right from the opening bell, because Karolina Kovalkovich, we know what the game plan is going to be from her. She's primarily a striker, but she is in there looking to brawl. She's looking to move forward and just land a ton of volume. So typically she puts on some pretty exciting fights. And then on the flip side, you have Demopolis, who's kind of a lesser version of that. Definitely more of a grappler as opposed to a striker, but she is just one of those fighters who isn't really great in any area, but she tries to just stay busy, and that kind of looks good. So she's definitely a willing dance partner in this fight with Kovalkovich, who both of them are just kind of looking to get busy. So I think we could see a lot of big exchanges early in this fight. I think Demopolis probably needs to get this fight to the ground, and even if she does, I'm not sure she's even going to have that big of an advantage. I don't know if she can sub Karolina Kovalkovich. I know we've seen that happen in the past, but we've seen the ground game kind of improve. Even at almost nearly 38 years old, Karolina's kind of shown off a better ground game in her last couple fights. So I don't even know if that's going to be a huge edge for Demopolis, and I just don't think her wrestling's good enough to get it there. And then on the flip side, I think Karolina's a better striker, probably the stronger wrestler. I think she probably just gets the better of the striking exchanges. Demopolis is kind of a punching bag. So we're going Karolina by decision. That's the official pick. Next fight up, we have another lightweight matchup between Slava Claus and Maheshete. And this one, Slava is coming in as a -165 favorite. The comeback on Maheshete is +140. And this is a high variance matchup because you have basically two powerful strikers, two good strikers that are both bad at defensive grappling and are both not interested in grappling. We'll start on the Borchev side. You know, coming off of Dana White's Contender Series, we know he was billed as this great striker, former kickboxer, like very good counter striker, powerful knockout guy, trains out of Team Alpha Male. And he just really hasn't been able to defend takedowns. That's been the story of his career so far. He burst onto the scene with a knockout victory in his debut. Since then, he's been out-grappled and lost his past two fights. He was taken down a combined 20 times. In those fights, he defends takedowns at just 31%. So he's one of the worst, actually, in the division at defending takedowns. He is good at defending submissions and working back to his feet. And that's why we've seen him taken down so many times, is because guys aren't really able to hold him down and control him. He's very good at popping right back up to his feet. But what that does is gives his opponent usually a very high ceiling to rack up those takedowns and continue to mat return him. Now, fortunately for him, this is a much different matchup for him because Maheshete is not interested in grappling whatsoever. So I don't think we see him shooting takedowns here. So I think we're going to see a high variance striking matchup. And Maheshete, he's not good at defending takedowns either. But again, that's not going to happen in this fight. What he does have, like Borchev, is power on the feet. We've seen it time and time again on the regional scene, and we've seen it at the UFC level as well. This dude does have power. Now, I still favor the technicality of Borchev. I think he's a much better counter striker, and I think that's probably what's going to be the difference here. Maybe Slava Claus catches him with a big counter and is able to put him out. So that's why I'm going Slava by knockout as the official pick. But again, this is a very high variance matchup. I'm not looking to lay the juice here, just because I think either guy can hurt each other and either guy can win by knockout. So in terms of DraftKings, I do think this is another strong target, and I'm going to look to have exposure to both sides across multiple teams. And kicking off the main card, we have Cesar Diego Ferreira, a -155 favorite, with the comeback on Michael Johnson at +135. And this is a matchup that I think is very fun as well for DraftKings, because on one hand, we have Diego Ferreira, who's primarily a grappler. We know he's very dangerous on the mat. He holds a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He's got a bunch of subs on his record. And then on the flip side, we have Michael Johnson, who comes from a collegiate wrestling background, but he really doesn't look to proactively wrestle. He's very good at defending takedowns. He defends at 80% in the UFC, and we've actually seen him stuff the last 13 takedown attempts against him over his last 3 fights. And those were all against guys known to land takedowns at the UFC level in Alan Patrick, Jamie Malarkey, and his last fight against Mark Diakase as well. So Michael Johnson is not going to give up the takedowns easy. And Diego Ferreira is kind of a guy that's not super aggressive in landing takedowns. So that's one thing that kind of concerns me, seeing him as a decent sized favorite here. And then also he's getting older now. He's 38 years old. He's coming off basically a 1.5 year layoff. So a long layoff here, getting older, not super aggressive in getting the fight to the ground against a guy who has shown to have good takedown defense, who's probably going to be a better striker. So I think there's concern here, and I totally understand this fight playing out pretty competitively. The reason why I can't get there on the dog shot is because Michael Johnson, I can never get this dude right. Anytime I trust him, he's just, even in fights he's winning, like that Thiago Moises fight, looks great in the first round, ends up getting submitted, heel hooked in the second round or something stupid. So I'm sure he's going to find a way to just whatever I predict, he's going to do the opposite. But I just lean towards Ferreira just being the better grappler. Maybe he's able to get this fight to the mat. Not initially. I think that's where he'll struggle. But if he does come in with an aggressive game plan, his last 3 fights, he lost all 3 of them, but he fought much, much tougher competition than Michael Johnson. So now just having an easier opponent than the 3 guys that he just faced, and coming off the layoff, I think he'll come in with the right game plan and just look to chain wrestle. And I think that's where he could have success here in forcing those grappling exchanges. And then on the feet, I think he's competent and he could be competitive, but I don't trust his durability. He's been knocked out a couple times. We've seen him hurt to the body as well. That Mateus Gamrot knockout was not a good look. And again, he's getting older, not younger. So those things are likely getting worse and not better. So this is one where I totally understand the dog shot. I'm probably just going to play it the easy way and hedge it on both sides on DraftKings, but I'm going to lean towards the favorite. I'm just not going to bet him at that price because of all those concerns I laid out. So we're going Ferreira by submission. That's the official pick. Next fight up in the welterweight division, we have Joaquin Buckley coming down to 170 here. He's a minus 215 favorite with the comeback on Andre Fialho at plus 185. And this is another high variance matchup because we have 2 guys that are both extremely powerful. 11 of his 13 wins on the Buckley side have come by knockout. 13 of his 16 wins have come by knockout on the Fialho side. These boys are looking to stand and trade. And what they also have in common, and why this just adds another layer of variance, is both of them have been knocked out repeatedly across their career. They've both been knocked out 4 times in their career. I don't really trust either of their durability and the way that they fight. I think there's a really good chance that somebody is going to sleep on Saturday. And so this is one, it's an obvious target on DraftKings. I think Fialho is probably more tempting just because he's so cheap. And he's an underdog who, if he wins, we know it's likely coming by an early knockout. So he does have that slate-breaking potential. So I definitely have interest there. I still slightly lean towards Buckley, and that's why he's going to be the pick here, just because I trust his durability just a little bit more, and I trust his skill set just a little bit more as well. But I wouldn't be shocked one way or the other if either guy wins by knockout here. So that's the way I'm going to play it on DraftKings. I'll probably have more exposure to the underdog, but the official pick is going to be Buckley by TKO. Next fight up, we have Lupi Godinez, a minus 155 favorite with Emily Ducote on the comeback at plus 135. And this is another bet for me. I bet Ducote really around the open at plus 170 for a unit. I just think this fight plays out much more competitively. I see this as basically a true coin flip fight. I know people like Godinez because of that wrestling ability, and I like her as well. I just don't trust the fight IQ. We've seen multiple times her not be super aggressive in using that wrestling, and I'm just not even convinced it's as good as we originally thought, because we've seen her struggle at times as well. And now she's facing a fighter who's not that easy to take down, who hits very hard on the feet, who is going to be throwing more volume than Godinez. Godinez is not a huge volume fighter. You know, she's a good boxer. She's got the good wrestling. She's not throwing a ton of volume in these fights, and she doesn't have good defense either. So I just think unless she just comes out here and aggressively chain wrestles, that's basically the only way she's covering this price tag. I just think this is going to be a very close kickboxing match. I think it plays out majority on the feet. Ducote hits hard. Godinez hits hard. They both land pretty consistently. I see it as basically a true 50-50 fight. I backed Ducote at plus 170. I hope she wins. We're going Ducote by split decision, and I don't hate that split decision prop. I basically never bet those, but at plus 380 on DraftKings, I do think this fight is going to play out really closely, but we're going Ducote by decision. That's the official pick. Which brings us to our co-main event, as Anthony Fluffy Hernandez is a minus 215 favorite with Edmund Shahbazyan on the comeback at plus 185. And this is one that I actually have multiple bets on. I bet Anthony Hernandez to win in round 2 at plus 500. And I also bet the fight does not start round 3 at minus 122. And the reason being, I just think this fight's very easy to break down because Fluffy Hernandez, we know what he's good at. He's got a very aggressive grappling pace. He averages 6.5 takedowns per 15 minutes. He's a good submission grappler, and he has great cardio as well. We know he can keep that relentless grappling pace for 15 minutes if he needs to. And then on the flip side, Edmund Shahbazyan is basically known as more of a round 1 finish or bust guy. And we've seen time and time again where if he's unable to get that first round finish, which I think is well within the range of outcomes here against Fluffy Hernandez, but when that doesn't happen, he gasses out very quickly. We've seen him get out grappled multiple times, and he just basically fades and crumbles. And I just don't think this fight really starts round 3 or sees the judge's decision at a very high clip at all. I think it's only a matter of time before Fluffy Hernandez breaks him on the mat with multiple takedowns, out grapples him, and potentially submits him. Or Shahbazyan just gets lucky and lands a big shot early. Either way, I don't see it starting round 3. So we're going Hernandez to win in round 2, Hernandez by submission, and hopefully it comes in that second round. Which brings us to our main event, as Mackenzie Dern comes in as a minus 170 favorite with the comeback on Angela Hill at plus 145. And this is a matchup that I think is very easy to break down because at this point we know what to expect from Mackenzie Dern. Yes, we've seen the striking start to develop a little bit, but let's make no mistake about it. She's still not a very good striker, and her best skill set is going to come with that submission grappling. The problem is her wrestling has never been good. She has one of the worst success rates in terms of her takedown attempts, and we know that she basically just has to pull guard or force some sort of clinch exchange to get this fight to the ground. But when she does get it to the ground, we know she's one of the most dangerous fighters on the roster. That is her world. She's got a ton of submissions on her record, and she's very capable of finishing the fight at any moment once she gets it down there. So she may only need just one grappling exchange. And that's basically what we say about her every single fight, because it's true in every single fight. And then on the flip side, Angela Hill, we've seen the takedown defense certainly improve. You know, technically it's only 77%, but over her last 3 or 4 fights, she's really been difficult to take down. You know, that Michelle Watterson fight comes to mind where she stuffed 17 of 18 takedown attempts. So I don't think that Dern's just going to be able to come in here and just immediately shoot a double leg, take her down, and sub her. But I think on the feet, Angela Hill is going to have a clear striking advantage. She comes from a Muay Thai striking background. She's going to be throwing more volume than Mackenzie Dern. Mackenzie Dern is hittable as well. So I think while the fight plays out on the feet, Hill is certainly going to be landing the more shots. The problem is over 25 minutes, I just don't trust her not to get involved in some type of tangle up, some sort of grappling exchange. We've seen it even in the fights where Dern didn't win, where she was able to get those grappling exchanges and came close to finishing the fight. We've seen that happen. I think if that happens here with Angela Hill, somebody that we've seen exposed on the mat to a degree, she's been submitted in the first round in 2 fights in the UFC against Rose Namajunas and Randa Marcos, and I think Dern is certainly a better submission grappler than both of them. So I think if she somehow gets tangled up with Dern here, I think Dern's probably ending the fight, and I think that is the most likely outcome here. So I actually bet Mackenzie Dern by submission at plus 180 for a unit, and I do think she somehow finds a way to get this fight where she needs it and pulls off the sub. So we're going Mackenzie Dern by submission. that's the official pick. And as always, guys, fightnumbers.com will have my DraftKings player rankings. It'll have ownership projections as well. A couple other things. It's all completely free. I'll pin it in the comments. Do me a favor if you didn't already, like the video and hit that subscribe button as I continue to grow my channel and bring you videos like this each and every week. I definitely appreciate the support, guys. Best of luck this week, and we'll see you all next time.